my estimation, we're about 2 weeks away from a bloody incident that spirals out of control. And this is just the kind of incident that Trump wants to justify more force coming in. So what's the end game on all this? If the president is going to fundamentally redefine the use of force in America, what's it all for? What I'm about to say, and my theory of the case, is something I never imagined saying. I believe Trump is reshaping the country to hold on to power.
It is a breathtaking thing to hear, especially from her. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock now in New York. Just put a pin in that for 1 second. That was, of course, Senator Elissa Slotkin. I'll show you the rest of what she had to say. Let her complete her argument in a second. But first, call to mind, once again, something we've talked about a lot on this show. This metaphor of a frog in a slowly boiling pot of water. A scenario that perfectly illustrates the difference between sudden and gradual peril, and one so often applied to our country's drift toward authoritarianism. In this case, we're the ones in the pot, being slowly boiled. Today, though, the New York Times editorial board handed the American people what amounts to a report card or thermometer, a set of what it calls 12 markers of democratic erosion with help from scholars who have studied the phenomenon. For example, an authoritarian stifles dissent and speech, as you can see there, bypasses the legislature, uses the military for domestic control, defies the courts, controls information and the news media, tries to take over universities, and manipulates the law to stay in power. The point Elissa Slotkin was making in the end there. New York Times editorial board gauges that Donald Trump has started to do all of those things. The list goes on because an authoritarian also persecutes political opponents, declares national emergencies on false pretenses, vilifies marginalized groups, creates a cult of personality, and uses power for personal profit. The New York Times editorial board asserts that Donald Trump has done every single one of those things. The good news is that the United States is not at present what the Times scores as a, quote, true autocracy in the mold of Russia or China. That's the good news. But a march in that direction is underway and continues. Pete Wehner writes in The Atlantic this, quote, a curtain of darkness is settling over our nation, and it's getting ever harder to avoid connecting the authoritarian dots. 1 year ago, right now, you would have been called an alarmist for saying these things. I know that from experience. In her remarks delivered this week, though, Senator Slotkin insisted she wasn't being alarmist, but that she is, quote, popping a flare at what a fraught moment this is in our nation's history. Watch.
Trump is following the same playbook as almost every authoritarian in history. The playbook is, first, get elected to address legitimate issues, in our case, the cost of living. Once in office, surround yourself with people loyal to you, accumulate power and influence, and then start using it against your perceived enemies. But here's the kicker. There comes a time in every authoritarian playbook where you hit a tipping point. You accumulate so much power that you realize if you ever lose and your opponent gets elected, they could use that very power against you. So you hold onto it with everything you have. That seems to be Trump's approach right now. And from everything we've seen so far, the Caribbean strikes, the list of domestic terrorists, military and law enforcement deployments across our American streets, he seems to be laying the groundwork to stay in power.